This is CRM Audio, the Microsoft Dynamics CRM podcast, with George Dubinsky, Joel Lindstrom, and Sean, the CRM Hobbit Tabor. Guys, it feels like just earlier this week that we were here talking already, because it
Weird,
was.
Huh?
In full confession to our audience, to our tens of listeners, I forgot to hit the start recording button. So we had a fantastic episode at 9. It was great. It was, I would say, the best episode we've ever done. We got to the end, and I looked, and my Skype for Business said start recording, and I had a sinking feeling in my stomach that we lost it. So this will be our most rehearsed episode.
Yeah, but I'm not anywhere near as caffeinated as I was the last episode. So I don't know how high I'll be on my game.
All right. Well, we'll see. How you doing, George?
I'm good. I'm very good. It all has strong deja vu feeling, but otherwise I'm very good. I probably know what we're gonna say well in advance, so it's quite good.
I think Gus Gonzalez had a good suggestion.
With.
Gus's suggestion was that I recreate the episode doing everybody's voice, like an impersonation. I thought that would be a good suggestion. All right, so Sean, what was our news this week?
Well, our news was about the Dynamics Salesforce collaboration that came out at Dreamforce. But a few things have come out since then. Basically, they were talking about how a lot of the new features of 2016 in terms of the Office 365 suite were also coming to Salesforce. The Skype for Business integration, OneNote integration, integration with Office Graph and Office Delve. And our prior conversation was whether or not this is good or bad for Dynamics, and is Dynamics giving too much away to the competition to not have differentiation. Since that announcement came out, now the timings have actually been released, and a little bit more information has come out. So, for example, for Skype for Business integration, Dynamics has had that integrated since, well, at least with integration with Skype has been offered since CRM 2013. And
wasn't the presence with Office Communicator before that, though? I mean,
right, it was.
It wasn't click to dial, but it was somewhat integrated.
Right, we had presence in 2011. So, but what's coming for Salesforce Lightning is it's a preview anticipated for the second half of 2016. And then OneNote is we've had that since 2015. Integrated, but again, that's another preview that's happening. So it's not exactly a one-to-one, and it's not the full-on product that we're getting in Dynamics CRM, which is interesting. And I can understand the strategy from Microsoft to get Office 365 in as many enterprise offices as possible. Right now, Salesforce has a lot of customers that Dynamics does not, and this simply paves a way to get that infrastructure in those businesses to possibly bring them over to the Microsoft stack.
I think the partnership has caused a fair amount of angst among Microsoft partners. I'm wondering, why are they giving all the goodies to Salesforce too?
Right.
My position is, kind of warmed up to it a little bit, because if you think about it, the people that use CRM are a lot of times Microsoft shops, where Salesforce was kind of the gateway drug to Google for a while there, because again, Microsoft Office and Outlook and Office Web and Skype and things like that were not integrated with it, but the Google Hangouts, the Google Docs, the Google Office was. And so I think, looking at just sheer market share, it's a market play, because that's where the big audience is.
Right. I'm also wondering how this is going to play into extending Azure and other services as a result, and see what that can do. So I'm not as concerned as I once was. It's a strategy that makes sense for Microsoft as a whole. It is concerning as a dynamic CRM partner, but it's now looking more like how Microsoft deals with, it's probably a terrible analogy, but it's one familiar to me. It seems like how Microsoft deals with software exclusives for games. So they'll have an exclusive on Xbox One for a year, and then PS4 can have it as well.
Right.
So it seems like that kind of thing. If they're giving this functionality or extending this functionality through integration to Salesforce, it's coming well after Dynamics CRM has launched with it. So
well, back when I was a Windows Phone user, that they had the Xbox exclusive games coming to Windows Phone, which was billed as a benefit for Windows Phone users. So you had things like the Halo Spartan attack on Windows Phone, and a bunch of Windows Phone users got really discouraged when they started releasing them for other platforms like iOS and Android. And now you see, I think they come out at the same time for all platforms. But for Windows Phone, it hasn't maybe been the best move, but for Microsoft and for Xbox, it's strengthened that, I think.
Exactly.
I've been a little bit bemused by the social strategy Microsoft has had over the last 2 weeks around Dreamforce, because you see these tweets coming from the Dynamic Social channel about top 4 tweets from Dreamforce or Sales Cloud or Marketing Cloud. And at first, when I first see them, it looks like they're promoting Salesforce. But then I actually read one of them, and as you get down to it, it's tailoring that message. And then here's a video about a company that did this, and it's a Dynamics thing. So I kind of, a little bit amused by that, kind of the subtle play on that. And I've even seen some of them tweeted out by Salesforce people. At first I was a little upset, like, why are they promoting Salesforce? But then I realized, they're taking the message and then applying it to CRM or to Dynamics.
Right. Doing those things are clever, but you have to be very skilled at it to not get the message lost in the delivery.
Right. Because if you only read the first 2 paragraphs, you think, wow, Salesforce is great.
Right. And they did another thing. I saw. I don't have the tweets up in front of me, but it was more like a kind of a parody of some of the things coming out of Dreamforce, which I was not sure about whether or not that was a good idea. But
Right. Yeah, and
it's interesting what you see coming out of it.
I did think Nadella's keynote or whatever was interesting. He had the moment where he was demoing Cortana, and it didn't understand what he was saying at all. So he just kind of moved on. And last night, my wife wanted to know where a certain store was. There's a certain chain of stores, and she wanted to know where is there one somewhat near to us. And so I asked Siri. I said, Siri, where's the nearest XYZ store? Siri did not have any clue what I was saying. Then I asked Cortana on my computer that I've upgraded to Windows 10, and at least she sent me to the website for that store with find our nearest location. So that was a win for Cortana in the Lindstrom house last night.
Cortana still reigns supreme here at the Tabor household because my wife can talk to her laptop and tell her how to do things. As I mentioned before on a prior podcast, my daughter hasn't picked it up yet, but my wife is talking to Cortana every day.
So George, as an Australia-Ukrainian, do either one of them understand what you're saying, George?
They understand perfectly well, and as I was saying, I managed to achieve a feat of sending an SMS message while driving without touching my phone, and it went to the right person. That was surprising. It didn't contain any swear words. It cut a bit short because I said something blah 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 blah, full stop, and it did put a stop, but it decided then that full stop means that I need to send it. So send. I said, no, that's not what I meant. But then you can't undo things easily. You can cancel and start over, but you can't just undo it. But someone told me an interesting thing about law concerning mobile phones in Australia. If you're driving and you're on hands-free, right? And that's where archaic laws come into play. And by archaic laws, I mean like 10 years old. If your phone is in a docking station, so if your phone is mounted, then you're good. If your phone is hands-free in your pocket on a Bluetooth, you're breaking the law. It's like roll back 10 years, Bluetooth wasn't even there, right? The only way to have a hands-free was to dock your phone inside the car like it would be a cradle or something like that, right?
Right.
There was a law that if phone is docked in a cradle, you're good to go, right? So if your phone is not docked and you're talking, regardless if it's hands-free, if you're not touching the phone, you're still breaking the law. So here's the kind of interesting fact about the law. But it's really interesting. What's interesting, how fast things become obsolete. And on the topic of what things are supported, what's not, and how fast things develop. And one of you mentioned Azure, right, and the Salesforce support. To me, I take particular interest in new Azure apps family, where you've got web apps and mobile apps and logic apps. And logic apps, it's orchestration. It's kind of what really disappointing to see is that support a connector for the Salesforce is there, but connector for Dynamics is not. And I truly hope when logic apps come out of preview, Azure people or Dynamics people, they will get around, particularly under Scott Guthrie, and they will deliver a connector. What happened, for example, to Power BI? When it was in preview, we all complained that connector to Salesforce is there, but Dynamics is not. But before it came out of preview, and now it's generally available, the Power BI has Dynamics connector, which connects and delivers fantastic looking sample data that you can take and modify, but it creates sales dashboard and connects to CRM data and pulls them in and all the sort of stuff. So it's really nice. So I hope that the story will continue, say, with the logic apps as well. So we'll get Dynamics connector before we get out of preview.
Oh, and before long, everything's going to be integrated with CRM. We'll have Windows Solitaire integrated with CRM somehow, I'm sure.
I'm not resting until Minesweeper is integrated.
Oh, that'd be cool. Like, imagine it tied in with your sales opportunity pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
Your wins and your losses. But back on the Cortana and Siri topic, have you ever hit the Cortana or Siri button on your phone at a time you didn't mean to? I mean, I've in a time of yelling at my kids, hit it, and it says, "Would you like to search the web for you kids sit down and be quiet?" So imagine George dictating this text, and he's sending text to his wife and says, "Honey, where do you want to go for dinner? Speed up, you dumb jerk," or something like that. All right, so as I say every week, that's enough about Salesforce.
Exactly. And I'm with you this time.
Yeah, because we're not Salesforce. We're not Salesforce Fortnite. That could be another podcast. That could be our next podcast. The next topic we wanted to talk about is with the slew of 2016 features. I think a lot of blog posts I'm seeing now are just high level. Look at this cool feature. Look at this cool feature without really digging in. And the one that has been getting a lot of questions from my customers last week at our customer conference, and if you heard our special episode last week, you heard parts of that. But one question that came up in several sessions was the offline capability for the mobile app, which kind of surprised me because, again, I've seen in the Outlook client, the percentage of customers using offline to be shrinking as in at least the North America, parts of Europe, and a lot of Asia. I mean, Asia, when I went to Japan, I had thanks to George, to your suggestion, I had a MiFi device that gave me faster Wi-Fi walking around Tokyo than I have in my house from my cable modem. But there are places that, especially we're hearing from companies that have worldwide presence, that people in parts of Italy or Australia or certain places where the population isn't as dense or the infrastructure isn't as great, offline is getting a lot of interest, and I think that's interesting. It seems like, from what I've seen, again reading the roadmap, I've never played with it yet, but it seems like it's very similar to how the Outlook client works, in that it's rules-based, and instead of when it synchronizing, moving a bunch of data, it's actually playing back user action. So when I go online, if I change the record 5 times, it's going to be changing the record 5 times. It also seems like
isn't that always been the case with the offline client? That was the case with Outlook client. So it plays back your actions.
Right.
It gives ability to run the workflows and triggers plugins and things like that. So by replaying it. So if you have some action on update and then delete, the end result is record's gone. But because your update may call some plugin, invoke some code and plugin and have side effect, that's why it's important that you play it back against the server as update followed by delete.
Right. It's very similar to that, but I bring that up because that's a common misconception people have, even though it's well documented in the old 4.0 nuts and bolts synchronization paper, also the latest one. But people think, it's just going to move all this data, but they don't realize that it's going to, because that can definitely have an impact in kind of unexpected results sometimes, where I think, okay, well, I've updated this record since that record was changed offline. This guy hasn't synced online for 2 weeks, and they sync, and their actions overdo it, or they suddenly get 5 notification emails. It's because it's playing back to user actions. One thing I'm curious on is, since the offline Outlook client kind of fell out of the spotlight a few releases ago, and if you look at a lot of the features introduced really since late 2011, early 2013, a lot of them don't work offline, starting with dialogues, real-time workflows. I think certain types of business rules, like server-side business rules, don't work offline too. I'm wondering if that will cause this new focus on offline will make them look at making some of these other things that don't work offline, if they'll bring some of those into the offline world. Because even like real-time workflows, if you have a process that uses a real-time workflow to name a record, and people are doing it offline, it's not going to work till they go online.
Now, if we had real-time workflows that were enabled online for mobile, at what point do we have an issue with storage space on the mobile devices?
Oh, I'm sure it would make things much more complicated. And for example, one of the things that arguably great with the offline client was the reports work offline, but you could also argue made a lot more bloated, having to have the local reporting services and things like that. So I'm sure there's good technical reasons why it's not.
Right, because I mean, just with a standard enterprise user, you're keeping a lot more mail on your device. You're keeping a lot more documents on your device. So the standard usage pattern for mobile, say you have a 16 gig iPhone, for the normal user with music and photos and stuff like that, you can run out of that space relatively quickly if your use is higher than normal. But in an enterprise situation, that could quickly expand if you're not really adhering to usage of cloud storage and apps. So that would be my main concern, is if the more things that come online, what is the opportunity cost that we're having to deal with because of the artifacts that have to reside on the device to enable those things.
And that's been my experience with using the third-party apps like CWR and Resco, is that not that they're bad apps, but those apps are offline-centric. They default to offline mode, CWR especially, where Resco now has the ability to make it more of an online primary client. But what happens is, and again, I haven't tested these with in the last year or two. Actually, I did Resco when I was writing the mobile book, but CWR, this is back in 2011 days with like an iPad 2. What would happen is, unless you were really careful about your rules, if the app got more than say 200-300 megabytes of data, the app would just die, because especially if you've got say a 16 gig iPhone, 3/4 of which is full of Office and Angry Birds and documents and videos and music and everything else you cram on the iPhone, there's a really limited amount of space for. So again, you're not going to want to take the whole database offline with you like some people do with the offline Outlook client.
Right, exactly. And just, I've always had those concerns with synchronization when you take that large amount of data off. If you forget to sync, or if the app doesn't have a default for time syncs, that sort of thing, it could really cause some issues with your support groups.
Yeah, and this one thing that's nice from what I've read is it's going to be purely background sync, which means it's going to sync in the background, and then when you go on the plane and don't have a connection, it's not that I have to hit the go offline button, it's just automatically offline. Let's talk about some of the things that have come out. If you look at the roadmap document, some of the things that are clearly spelled out there. One of the things I think surprised some of my clients that are on premises is that this is on CRM online only. You have to be online to go offline. And part of that, from my understanding, is because when you synchronize the offline data, it's not going directly against your CRM database. They're using an Azure-based sync engine, and so since CRM Online being in the cloud, it has that closer integration with Azure. So that's one thing that you need to be aware of. This is going to be important for you if you're a enterprise client that has people all over the world, and some of which need to be offline. Then online probably is the way to go. I don't know that it's not going to come to on-premises, but at least this release is not going to. The other one that's currently published is that they're going to require at a minimum of 30 users for you to be able to use offline. Speculation with that is that it's because of Azure licensing. And so, George, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that this 30 users, it's a strange number. For one, because all the trials are 25 users. So you kind of automatically exclude offline for trials. So you can't even show it to the prospective clients regardless how many licenses they're going to buy. But what surprised most of us is the fact that why they can't follow a simple model that is already used by lifecycle services. The deployment of on-premise infrastructure into Windows Azure virtual machines. Dynamics AX people have been using that for quite some time, and now you can do it with Dynamics CRM. It's available now. So you can go to Lifecycle Services and you can provision VMs, and it will deploy CRM using best practices into your VMs. Now, same problem, so same challenge, right? So you consume in Azure resources. So LCS solved this problem very easily. It's a BYO Azure resources. So LCS says, I will deploy CRM into VMs, but you have to give me an Azure subscription to deploy those VMs to.
Right.
So why they can't do the same, that's what that was asked. I think there's still discussion, so we hope it's going to change. But the idea is that why not to give people ability to bring their own Azure resources to the table and say, here's my Azure subscription, use it as you see fit. I doubt that the change, the charges are that significant that you can't sustain those. Plus, it will promote Azure, use of Azure among the CRM subscribers,
Or either bring your own, or if there's a minimal cost, I think many companies would understand, if you have less than 30, you have to pay X amount to enable the offline capabilities. So maybe make it free for over 30.
But someone pointed, I think, David pointed that if you have more than 30 users, you probably don't care about this charge anyway.
Right.
Right, so it's kind of, let's assume it's $150 per month.
Right.
If it's less than 30, you have to pay it anyway. If you have more than 30 users, it's a blip on your radar. You don't care about it.
Right. And I know Azure is now a pretty sizable business for Microsoft. It's over $1 billion. I don't know what the current amount is, but I've read that a fair amount of that is Azure licensing baked into other products. You're seeing Azure services being used in many products, and that's only going to increase. So again, I think those are the things. I think enterprise clients are going to use it. I do think that the challenge is if they say it's only available for 30 users and 25 is the minimum trial, nobody's going to be able to try offline. So let's introduce our guest. Derik Bormann is the President and Director of Learning at Miriam Technology Solutions, and he's based out of Fargo, North Dakota. Derik has been helping us out with a series of Friday videos, CRM Tip of the Day, and they all start with the Tipster's Guide too. So we had the Tipster's Guide to the CRM app for Outlook. We had the Tipster's Guide to the folder synchronization. We've had a series of great Unified Service Desk USD videos that I think have been pretty popular. So, Derik, thanks for joining us this morning.
Well, good morning. Thank you for having me. How are you guys?
Derik, what do you, in your role as Director of Learning at Miriam, what do you do?
Primarily right now, I've been doing a lot of content writing, so I'm doing a lot of stuff for Microsoft on some of their upcoming courses and helping getting those ready to go as those come out and doing course updates. And then a lot of deliveries, depending upon what the topic is, varies not as much for the basic stuff anymore, but every once in a while I'll get a request to do those. But I do a lot of the developer training and integration training, and a lot of the USD training is probably the major stuff that I'm getting calls for right now. So content development and deliveries are probably the two biggest things right now.
Right. So I think a simple perusal of YouTube will show that there are a lot of people doing how-to type videos, even about CRM. There's not a ton of them doing them well. And what I appreciate about yours are they're very to the point. It's obvious that you have prepared your thoughts and prepared the outline, but they're very concise as well. They're not 3-hour-long videos. How do you approach when you're like a topic like USD or the Outlook app? How do you approach that?
Well, I think when I do them, I think the primary goal when we were first kind of thinking up the whole thought of it was we wanted them to be, ideally in that 5 to 10 minute range. So if you were, on a coffee break or something, you could sit down and you can watch them. And so when I was first kind of thinking of how to do them, my thought process was, well, most people will want to understand the how and the why. And so I figured that I could basically show them the how and explain the why while I was showing it to them, as opposed to doing all of the, well, here's this situation and here's this situation. I learn best when it's just kind of presented to me and I have an opportunity to follow along. And so that's always been kind of my style, even if it's a classroom environment. And so I kind of map out what are my key points that I want to really get across in this 5 to 10 minute video. And then a lot of it is just kind of as I'm doing it, I just talk. And I think as George knows with me, I do like the sound of my own voice, so I do like to talk. And so that's kind of what happens is I throw in little things here and there that I think just might be helpful as we're working through it. So
I'm just looking at some stats, and as you know, we had great stats on CRM app for Outlook and Dynamic CRM for phones, so people definitely attracted to a mobile side of things, particularly new CRM phone client that is available with update 1 for CRM, where you don't no longer get this express side of things, but you get full forms rendered on the phone. So that's attracting interest. But per day, the fastest growing video is USD demo. So could you tell us, you've done 3 videos so far, and I know you have in mind a few more for USD.
Well, I think, ideally if you think about like call centers or, any type of service-based help desk kind of organization where you have agents or representatives who are going to potentially need to work with multiple line of business applications and multiple cases or multiple customers at the same time, USD is kind of an ideal fit because they'll have probably the help desk application, probably dynamic CRM. There's probably a knowledge-based application. They might have 4 or 5 different applications that for one customer interaction they have to touch. And so now you've got 4 or 5 screens that you need to work with from there. But at the same time, you might have 4 or 5 different cases or points of interaction that you're dealing with for individual customers that you're working with at one time. And so now you've potentially got, 20 different screens that you have to kind of manage and work with. And so from a USD perspective, what it really does is it streamlines that all into kind of one desktop application interface that a user can use. And what the videos kind of talk a little bit about is how that whole process works. So it splits things up into sessions. And so ideally you could have one session open per customer. And then within that session, you might have multiple tabs open that reflect maybe 4 or 5 different disparate applications. So one could be a tab specifically with your CRM application, one could be a tab specifically with an accounting application or a help desk application, and then maybe another one is a web application. But they're all tied together based upon the fact that you need to be serviced through that same customer. And so using Unified Service Desk, it actually takes the context of what's being opened and the user and the record information and allows you to pass certain parameters between these different non-integrated applications in past situations and now have kind of a complete look into all of those applications at the same time. And it's nice because you don't necessarily have to do a full-on data integration when you're working with that. You can actually do everything kind of through the application front end and using web services and using some of the utilities that CRM already ships to be able to link those items together.
Now, one thing I've appreciated about your videos, though, is that the documentation or the other videos I've seen have all been developer focused. They all get very quickly very technical, which is great because there's a lot of development stuff. But I mean, from your perspective, do you have to be a developer to use the USD?
No, you don't. I mean, if you truly wanted to bring it into a 100% production environment, do you need to have a developer? Absolutely, yeah. There's just no way around it from that perspective. But if you want to get an idea of what's capable and even some of the, build some baseline, maybe smaller solutions for testing or even in smaller companies with maybe 20 to 30 users, you wouldn't necessarily have to have a developer because it's been designed as such where a lot of the configuration in regards to how you want the events to happen and those kind of things can be done and are designed to be done directly through the UI or through the CRM user interface. And that's one of the things that I don't know if we've gotten to that point in the videos yet. That's on my list for the next video is to actually show how easy the configuration is. We've demoed the product and shown them how to navigate and what concepts, but we haven't necessarily shown configuration yet. And it is very easy. You don't need a developer if you're trying to set that stuff up. And once a developer has created kind of, external applications or items like that, and you can bring them into USD, and now you can set it up so everybody can interact with them without having to be a developer from that standpoint. So it's very much like the customizations philosophy around CRM, where you may need a developer to create a shell of something, but once it's in there, you don't have to be a developer to truly allow your users to encompass it and consume it.
Right, but I think the thing that is lost in some of the videos people have made about USD and how-to videos is a lot of the people that drive those decisions are not the developers. They're the business people. They're the people who are in charge of the call center, for example, if using the common call center or wherever you're going to be using it. And so having something understandable about the user experience and the power of it that is not strictly technical and developer oriented is a great thing.
Oh, I absolutely agree. I think, a lot of the videos that you see on that are directly driven, like you said, from a developer perspective. And it all boils down to, what's going to be the best user experience for the people who are consuming that. And those decisions are typically based upon usability. And that's one of the nice things that I've seen with USD is it's very easy to get the information out to the appropriate people in a format or in a display that's going to accommodate a lot of different people, because it's so customizable. It's just amazing how different that user interface can look from instance to instance.
If I'm a developer, what technologies would I need to be to know? What technologies I would need to be kind of fluent in to be comfortable with USD, extending USD further?
Well, in most situations, I mean, it's really just creating .NET application, so Visual Studio. If you download the CRM SDK, actually within the CRM SDK, there's several UII templates that you can use to actually specifically start building different types of components that can interact with Unified Service Desk, whether it's from a call adapter situation, whether it's just kind of a generic hosted control, or if you wanted to use the hosted application toolkit, you could actually use that to start creating your own hosted external applications directly through Microsoft or your own hosted applications just using Visual Studio. And in that situation, you can connect and publish right up into your CRM instance directly out of Visual Studio at that point.
Interesting. So, and as I understand, USD, it's a thick client, so it's not a browser-based application, though it does reuse some of the browser's capabilities. It hosts CRM Windows, for example, but itself, it's a thick application. Can you tell rationale for going that way, not thin browser-based server run on the server exposed through the browser integration, but why Microsoft opted for installable client?
It's still running browser-based because it's using, in a lot of cases, from a CRM perspective, it's using, the CRM pages.
Well, that's not only browser, right? So you can automate, if you have an old Visual Basic application, you can control it and automate it, right? So which you can't do from the browser.
So yeah, I mean, the concept being, if you've got any type of application that you want to bring in, it could be a legacy app, it could be it could be the Windows calculator on your local desktop, could be integrated with Citrix-based desktop applications that you want to bring in, could be browser-based, it could be a user web page or any of those types of things. It doesn't matter where the application resonates from. It can be brought into the user interface by using the USD client. And so that's kind of the nice thing that you get from that perspective, is it doesn't have to just be everything sitting up in the cloud or everything sitting on a web-based technologies. If you have local applications, legacy applications that you want to bring in, those legacy apps can also be brought in to the application without having to necessarily truly integrate them together, so you just can connect to those applications directly.
That's fantastic. I like the idea of integration on the user interface level.
That's probably where the integration with Microsoft with Windows Solitaire is going to come in that I was talking about earlier.
So do you want to take a bet if it's going to be a Solitaire or Minesweeper?
I don't know. I see. I close an opportunity, it deals a new hand or something like that. I think that'd be good. So Derik, what's on your roadmap for the videos? You mentioned you had a couple other USD ones. What else do you have coming?
So we just did a theming one, just because we've had a few people asking questions about that, and so I put together just a real quick theming one. But as far as on the radar at this point, the USD ones are definitely ones that we're going to continue to go with. I'm actually kind of looking at doing some ones on, like, I don't want to say oldies but goodies, but some of the features that maybe people haven't necessarily had a chance to play with. I'm trying to figure out what the best approach is going to be to start dealing with like queues and routing and stuff like that, just because I think there's a lot of interest in that and trying to kind of find a fun, different way to present some solutions or topics on that.
Right.
So that's kind of one that I'm working on from that perspective. And then, looked at potentially maybe even doing like a Parature knowledge integration piece, just so people kind of understand how that works. But really, sometimes they come to me 2 days before I'm going to record them, and sometimes I can plan them out, 2-3 weeks ahead of time. So if there's any suggestions that, users have or anybody has, I'm definitely open to that as well. Because like I said, before we got into the USD series, there was a couple ones where it's kind of the night before. It's like, oh, here, I got it. So,
So if people wanted to get in touch with you or send you suggestions or feedback, what's the best way to do that? You on Twitter?
Yep. So you can just do @Derik_Bormann. So that's DERIK_BORMANN, and that's probably the easiest way at this point. So.
All right, so George, you want to tell us about your tool of the fortnight?
Yeah, well, these podcasts went a bit quicker than the last one, the not recorded one, so I have a bit of time.
When we rehearse, we get faster.
The tool of the week is slightly different. It's not this time. It's not a personal tool, but I recently started a project with a group of people, and I decided to try a tool that I've heard about but never tried it myself. I decided to give a shot to Slack.com, which is kind of it's hard to describe. It's I would say it's kind of Yammer the way it should have been done. It's a tool for team interaction, so it's a chat. But you can drop files. It's searchable. It's got history. It's got multiple channels. You can tag people. You can write simple documents. You can post in there, or you can write complicated documents in Word, and you can link there. It's got integrations with different tools. For example, when developers commit a build into Visual Studio, I can set up integration, so I get a message inside Slack that such and such committed a build, so I don't have to look for it. It's got heaps of integrations with other tools. It can trigger things as well. I don't know, there's many people try to implement a team communication tool many times before. There are a number of implementations, some good, some bad, but this one just seems to be getting everything right. The biggest advantage or the biggest accolade I received so far was I asked business user, I said, so what do you think? Are you getting any value out of it? And the reply was, she said, this is fantastic. I love it. I absolutely love it. So that's probably the biggest accolade you can receive. When business people start using it alongside of developers, that's where teams start gelling and communications happen.
You introduced me to Slack, trying it out for this podcast. And, I like the tool, and all these collaboration tools are very similar. Yammer, Jabber, Slack, they all have a core set of features. They implement them differently. Slack to me feels more like an open slate in some ways, where it's, Yammer kind of confines you to working certain ways where, you can have groups and things like that. But to me, what it comes down to is the critical mass of who else is using it. Because, to me, given that my organization's on Yammer, and introducing Slack, it doesn't fit in. I can see if my company or if a team I was working on, I think it worked great for a focused team. If everybody on the team was on that tool, that would give me a reason to go there. They have a good mobile app. Again, I like some of the things you've shown me about how to drag and drop Dropbox links and things like that. So yeah, that's good. I've got several clients that use it too, and I think a lot of people go through this. I'm going to try this tool. Oh, this shiny new one came out. I'm switching over here. what I tell people is pick a tool and go with it. Even if it's the most basic tool in the world. But I see a lot of similarities between that and your workflow tool too, because that's also something you can somewhat collaborate with people on, right?
I'm going to do a bit of promotion. I'm going to be doing training during at CRM Extreme. At Extreme CRM in San Diego, and the training is called Dynamic CRM: The Art of Performance. And one of the topics I'm planning to discuss is performance not of your code, which is going to be discussed as well. It's a large part of that training. But I'm going to discuss performance of people as members of team. And so the bottom line is, if I can sum it up, is whatever works. The best tool in the world is absolutely useless if it's not getting used.
Right.
So whatever works for your team. So Slack, why it didn't work, say, for podcast, let me guess, we didn't use it. Right. So as simple as that.
Yeah, this is a link that I found, and I read this this is a 10-year-old blog post, but I came across the other day, and this is and I'll post it in the link, but it's a post from 2006 from, I think it's a SharePoint MVP, but he was in jest saying he wanted to be a Notepad MVP, and has a blog post about why Notepad is better than SharePoint. So I thought
absolutely.
And what underscores the humor in here is that whatever tool you have, even something like Notepad, if you use it, it's useful. If you can have the greatest tool in the world, and if you don't use it, it's worthless. So I thought that was kind of humorous.
Absolutely, and I do use both tools. And for example, I use Slack now with the team, but I work with individual developers as well outside on separate projects. And I do use, for some developers, I use Workflow as a tool. We just have a shared node on the workflow tree for the items that need to get done. It's kind of simple projects where you don't have to go for documentation or anything like that. People understand each other, do this, do that, and it's done. And I use Workflow for personal stuff, which I can't use Slack. I can't talk to myself, right, on the Slack. So
you can try. I mean,
True.
I use systems to make notes for myself. That's why I use OneNote for my reminders or tasks and things like that.
I love OneNote. We use it for, OneNote worked for us for the podcast, for example. Slack didn't work, OneNote worked. So whatever works. But I love it if you've got a team of developers, particularly if team is dispersed in space and time, like my team is. So I've got developers in different time zones, and it's handy. It's handy. You can ask questions, you can tag, you can pin posts, and you can search conversations. So it does work. So, and it's got client for iOS, it's got client for Android, it's got Windows client, and it's got the web client. So it's got things covered. So enough of promotion. I'm just saying that's tool of the week. So I use it, and I recommend if you work with within the team, give it a shot. It might work for you. If other tools didn't work, give it a shot.
So one other tool, not really directly related to CRM, that you put in the agenda was the Outlook Clutter feature. Have you been using the Office 365 Clutter feature?
No, not yet. I was going to ask you guys that.
Yeah, I've been using it.
How many of you? I noticed the folder; it just appeared.
Yeah, so I've been using it, but I have a recent development that kind of probably a tip I'm going to use for it. But I mentioned this back, and there was a one of the tips I mentioned, the Clutter feature. It was actually about something regarding email, and on a personal level, I like it. It's actually using machine learning, and it kind of is an intelligent spam folder. It's a reaction. It's a reaction, I think, to Gmail's feature to separate your promotional emails and your social emails and your gray mail, not spam. Things that are between spam and legitimate emails, like newsletters I subscribe to that I don't really want, advertisements that I sign up for, and it does a fairly good job on a personal level. cycle, meaning I look in my clutter folder, and it's splitting out, certain notification emails that I get. For myself, it's moved like 3,000 emails over the last 6-8 weeks, and they've all been things that I'll peruse once a week, and I haven't had it have a false positive, but somehow it got turned on our support inbox that people email, and we started getting emails from a couple clients yesterday, the day before. I sent an email, I didn't hear anything back, and I looked at the log in for the mailbox, and I saw a bunch of emails, one every couple hours, saying Slack has moved, or like Clutter has moved messages to your Clutter folder. And so I logged in, and sure enough, there was 2 weeks worth of client emails. So I turned it off on there, and I don't know if it got turned on automatically, if there was something with the move to 2016 or what.
No, it does turn on. As I understand, it does turn on automatically. Tell us how to switch it off, because that's useful. I have no idea.
Yeah, you got to go. You got to go to Outlook Web Access in the settings, and when I write the tip of the day, I'll put it there. You don't turn it off, but there's a setting on it, like automatically separate the clutter or don't automatically separate the clutter. And I have a feeling that for people using online, there may be other people having their client emails getting to it. I don't know exactly how it works. I know machine learning's involved, so I'm assuming it's training itself based on user actions. And if you have an inbox where nobody's physically touching it, and you're not deleting stuff or moving things, to trash, it's probably most prone in those situations to false positives, because it doesn't have there's nothing to learn off of. Whereas from my own personal experience, I find it's worked very well. So I would say,
but does it detect when you move email back from Clutter to inbox?
I think so. Yeah, like the times where I've had certain newsletters where I say, you know what, I want these to be, not Clutter, just moving it. And in OA, it's got a little like broom symbol that not Clutter.
Okay.
And it works pretty well. But I wish they would. So now we've got the spam folder, the junk folder, and the Clutter folder. I wish really they would unify these together, because having these three different things and having to check these different things. I know the classic one is, no matter what I do, my MVP renewal notification always goes to one of those
spam
folders.
Yeah, it's. But I've got another one for you, which I completely forgot, and I'm using it on my Gmail folder, where my private email that I use for subscriptions and things like that. The service is called unroll.me. So if you go to the website unroll.me, it explains what the service is. Basically, it grabs all the subscriptions that you have in your mailbox, all the rubbish subscriptions you can't be bothered to unsubscribe, right? And it rolls them up into single email per day. I think it's configurable. I don't remember. Into single email per day. And you can say, no, this one I'd rather receive, or this one, yeah, let it stay there. And then it's got some of the services it can unsubscribe automatically, but you receive like Reader's Digest of all your subscriptions. And it's presented in a nice tiled form, so it's actually very nice.
I tried that. What irritated me, I think that was the one that wanted me to tell all my friends about it, so that before it would do anything.
No, this one doesn't tell your friends about it. I don't know. This one, yeah. What that does nicely, though, at least in Gmail, it has a label called unroll.me. So if I'm interested in native subscription email, I can always go there, because that's where all subscriptions end up. And then it sends me Reader's Digest of all the subscriptions. So I've got my provider news, like Telstra. I've got frequent flyers emails. I've got renewal bounces, and things like that. Well, I'm glad that I just looked. Oh my goodness. One of my hosting domains is due to expire in 5 days. I would have lost like about 15 clients if that domain expired. Aren't you glad that we're talking? Well,
Yeah.
I am, because I just picked up the
So it's
email that
it's
went-
providential that we didn't record last time. That's great.
Absolutely. So fantastic.
One of the other features that we talked about trying is the newbie mistakes. And we all make newbie mistakes. Actually, I think, George, you said that you can't remember ever making any newbie mistakes last time. But for the rest of us,
That was last time. I probably did.
For the rest of
Might
us
have.
mortals, we've all made mistakes. And one of the things I think for tip of the day or CRM community, one of the biggest things I hope is by us contributing this stuff, other people can avoid the mistakes that we've made. And the most I've learned is through mistakes I've made. So one of the newbie mistakes I made was after I think I'd been on the job at probably 8 months, and it was doing a configuration towards the end of the year, and we talked. There's when you create an entity, there's 3 or 4 decisions you need to make when you create it that cannot be changed. One of them is the schema name of the entity. One is the primary attribute. One is the ownership, whether organization or user/team, and I think there's one more. Is there another one?
I don't remember.
All the other stuff like notes or activities. And George's suggestion is uncheck all the other boxes, like for notes or activities.
No, there are, as we discussed, there are 4 decisions to be made for any new entities that you have to make when you create it. So, display name, whether it's organs, individual ownership, activities, whether it's activity or not, and schema name.
Right.
The rest you just uncheck.
Right. So my newbie mistake that I made during that configuration was I set the entities, there were 3 or 4 entities that I set to organization owned rather than user owned. The reason was, in talking to the client, the original decision was we don't want to show the owner field. And back in CRM 3 or CRM 4, before we had team ownership, and before now we got the checkbox don't show on the form, it was a lot more limited how you could not show things on the form, but saying we're never going to have security around this. And then as we got closer, we learned, oh wait, we need to have this group able to see these records, meaning it needed to be user owned. And so the mistake I made there was I had to spend a good portion of my Christmas break recreating these entities and moving the data back into it. And through that very painful lesson I learned, I will almost always use user and team ownership, especially now that we have the business unit team, and you can give everybody access to it, even if they say there'll never be an owner, because I've learned in multiple deployments when a client says, we never will, I hear, we probably won't, but we very strongly might in the future. So, the newbie mistake not to avoid is, make sure you choose correctly there, and unless there's a very, very, very good reason, go with user and team ownership is my recommendation.
Oh, I just remembered a mistake. I'm not sure if it's qualified as a newbie. Probably newbie as in newbie ISV mistake I made not so long ago. What we did is we have a product that is two-way SMS messaging.
Okay.
The difference is actually two-way, right? And it supports multiple numbers, multiple inbound numbers, and things like that. So one of the things you need to do when you receive a message, you need to match it to a client number, right? You need to search contacts for the number. So how are you going to do search if you receive just a 10-digit number, inbound number, and it's 10 digits? And people tend to record numbers, with using brackets, dashes, whatever. So I said to developer, it's very simple. We add a new field called normalized number, right? And then we go through the database and we normalize all the numbers. So we had this a beta test inside, and And we said, look, we're going to do this, normalizing numbers. That allows reliable two-way communication. Fine. So we installed our solution, and we wrote a piece of code that would go through and normalize those numbers and put them into this normalized field. Everything is working. The SMS was flying two-way. And then we got a call from very, very angry client because they have about 600,000 customer records.
Okay.
And they rely on modified by and modified on field heavily, right?
Right.
In their business, the way they structure data, the way they view data, the way they
are they looking at things like who did what activities with that? That seems to be the most common one of looking at
I'm not sure. Look, I'm not involved in the deployment. I'm not involved in the actual deployment. We just involved with our product with them. But guess what modified on and modified by were after we've done our run? It was the same user for all 600,000 records, and all within like few hours of each other.
Because were you actually updating something with it, or what were you doing?
No. We created a new field called normalized mobile number.
Oh, okay. So just adding that field and updating the data in it. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
So
that's
we
funny.
needed to normalize the numbers. Well, since then we kind of resolved this problem by creating another entity and taking numbers there, which solves the problem and allows more flexibility. But we should have done it in the first place.
I always question people basing any kind of mission critical reports, or we had call centers that base their compensation and bonuses based on number of activities modified. But the modified on, modified by are so fragile. You look at it sideways, it'll change it. So, I always encourage people to use it. But I can understand the angst that would cause.
Yeah, but look, it wasn't my decision, and it wasn't my decision to tell them. It wasn't my call to tell them that you're doing things wrong. Right. I was there to deploy my solution as ISV, deploy and walk away, right?
As ISV, you're doing it wrong is not a popular response. I'm just saying in general, when my users internally say, hey, why'd you change? We update some fields, and they say, why did all these change? And I say, why are you looking at the modified date anyway? Let me ask you a question related to that product, though. My understanding is if you're doing SMS, there's a whole lot of complexity if you're doing international SMS, because I've dealt with international clients and they've said that for me to send SMS messages in US to people in Japan, I have to buy some kind of a license almost for a carrier over there. Is that a true understanding? Did your SMS product text people in Korea and things like that?
No, not quite. To send SMS out, you can send virtually to any country in the world. The price will vary. If you send into North Korea, you probably will pay $5 per symbol or something like this. I don't know. So you can send SMS virtually to any number in any country in the world. Now, what they meant probably, if you want to have an inbound number.
Yes, I think that's what it was.
Yeah, inbound numbers have certain limitations. So we've got the list of about last time I checked was about 25 or 30 countries where you can get inbound number. The price varies, and there's no there's no logic in those prices. So some strange pricing. You can have countries where the number costs $2. You can get countries where the number costs $14, and
in some cases it was thousands of dollars.
Oh, I'm not sure about thousands, but India, for example, because SMS is very popular in India, inbound number in India was $140 or something like that per month. right? So, and to get inbound number in Japan is virtually impossible. That was one of the things, right? So, so we're talking about inbound numbers, definitely. Right. So where your market
to make it
is.
So your clients there, it's almost like some countries you have to have a local subsidiary in that country to really get get an inbound number.
So the idea is, for example, if you're an international company and you have sales teams, say in UK, Australia, and US, you can have 3 numbers and assign them to each team and SMSs, and then you set the rules where SMS messages would go from the local number to a customer based on a customer location or customer country or customer phone number rather. And then when customer replies to a local number, which costs them nothing typically these days or included in the plan, the local team would receive this message in their queue or individual, whatever. So there's some flexibility there. But the idea is, yes, you're right. So there's inbound numbers are per country basis, and there's a limited number of countries where you can get reasonably priced number, and some countries have strong legal obstacles, like Japan would be one of them.
Right, correct. All right, well, I think that brings us to the end of episode 9. I don't know about you, George, but I think our redo of episode 9 was even better than the original take on it.
I think we might make it a rule. Rehearse episodes. It goes much smoother. You know what you're gonna say, and you know what the other party is gonna say. So now I understand why some of TV shows are rehearsed.
There's a reason why live TV went out of fashion.
True.
This has been CRM Audio, the Microsoft Dynamics CRM podcast. You can hear previous episodes on our website, crm.audio. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, follow us on Twitter at CRM Audio, or leave us a comment on our Facebook page, facebook.com/CRM podcast. If you have any topic suggestions or questions that you would like for us to answer on a future episode, please drop us an email at voice@crm.audio. Special thanks to Dale Simmons for our theme music. Go check out his website, dalesimmons.com. Please join us next time on CRM Audio.